Hi, everybody. It's Jeff here. I've already done a previous video today on healthcare as a necessity or a commodity, and now I want to deal with education as a necessity or a commodity. I don't want to repeat everything, so what I suggest you do is you go watch that other video first on healthcare as a commodity or necessity. Um, it's up on my LinkedIn channel. I'll probably put the link here in this video up on YouTube to point to the other one to watch first, right? Um, I just want to another analogy on the education one, how this comes to play in addition to the healthcare one, because they're really very similar debates, very very similar, and with slightly different um, uh, kind of revealing symptoms or the way that they express themselves and manifest themselves, but they are very similar. Um, and one person that he did, I mentioned this in another post, and I'll just start with this, that Facebook post said that education and healthcare are commodities, and it was an American point of view. Someone had money, right, and saw that and stated that, and so I kind of talked about the healthcare aspect in the other video, which is worth watching first. Um, for the education thing, I spent my all of my formative years and my teenage years and the beginning of my early career and all my beginning of my university years, college and university in the United States. And after I think 3 degrees, I finally came to Europe, and I bounced back and forth a couple times to start my master's in the United States. And I actually finished up doing it in France, and then my master's and doctoral studies in France. And and so I've kind of lived on the different sides of the fence in this whole education thing, um, and taught at universities in America, in the United States, and actually taught. Now that I think about it, taught in several universities in France too. Uh, and then I got out of the academic kind of world at a certain point in time after about 8-10 years, and then got into industry. And I do dabble with I work back and forth, working with academic folks in different roles, but I haven't stayed as being employed in that whole thing, that industry, that field, right, academic field. Um, but I think what's important here is, again, it comes down to, is this a necessity? Is education, both primary education or primary education, and this depends on the country, right, and how much money they got, and it comes down to that. So it's just funding, right, and how do you pay for it? You pay by taxes, right? Um, so is primary education, that is, at what age does that start, right? So some countries it starts at age 5 or 6 in kindergarten level, 5 or 6 years old, and moves on to about 18 years old, kind of that range, right? Um, and then is that education, and then is early preschool education before school, is that a necessity or just a extra thing you have to pay for, right? So, or pay for it's an extra thing that's covered or not by taxes or not. Again, it comes back to this. And then is university level, is that a necessity to get a job or not? Or something that you opt to pay for. And again, I'm keeping coming down. This comes down to so I lived in the United States, and actually when I got married and I took my French wife back to the States, she actually worked in preschools. She had worked in preschools in France, and then worked in preschools in the United States. It was a way different thing, way different. It was like private stuff, and and a way different view on this whole thing. So I've seen this from both sides, living at both sides, and living it from both sides, living in the other one, both sides, right, with family, and really interesting. And with my wife's a teacher, right? So and she saw this from that. So this is really interesting to perceive. Is this a commodity, or is this a necessity? Is it a necessity, again, as a collective thing, a benefit for the citizens and residents of a country to be able to benefit from that, and to be able to, um, based on taxes, that will pay for it, or at least significantly subsidize it, right? Uh, uh, or is this something that you have to pay for individually from an individualistic point of view perspective? worldview, mentality, whatever you want to call this, which are based on books. And you got to watch the other video, the first one, the healthcare, because I talk more and more about this, right? Um, and you see my videos and working with the French and with series and working with the French and understanding working with the Americans and working with the Germans, where I talk more about this per point, right? Per specific point, each mentality, each specific national trait that it's a tendency in certain. That's you can find across cultures. You just break it down to each culture, right? So this again is education a necessity based on taxes that should be offered at what levels, right? Preschool, primary school, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and university, and then advanced university studies, right? At which ones of them should be offered as a tax subsidized benefit, and which ones could be partially subsidized, or which ones should be not subsidized, right? And you have to work for it, right? And you have to pay for it. And then it comes out that commodity thing. Do you pay for do you just get the one you want, and you pay for the one you have based on your own analysis, right? This really is, as it comes out of the whole individualism versus collectivism approach, right? So I think that's a really underlying factor, and how that affects the people in the country, and how they want to pay taxes, don't want to pay taxes for things, and then I've seen, especially in the healthcare things, I've seen, or on the education one specifically, I've seen people, adults, my age, who are beginning to have grandchildren, right? Or don't have grandchildren, right? And I've seen people make posts on Facebook and stuff saying, we don't have children in school anymore, so we want to pay taxes for education. We want to be exempt from paying taxes for education because we don't have kids in school anymore. And that's a very individualistic point of view, perspective. Whereas in countries where education is like free, let's say free, it's paid by taxes, but there's no additional or significant addition. It's very affordable. Let's say it's a very, very affordable, $200 a year, right? The equivalent of $200 a year, $300 a year. I mean, that's very affordable, right? Kind of like how state school, public university is in Texas, where it's like, at least back 20 years ago, when I was looking, 30 years ago, when I was looking, where it's like $200 a quarter, right? This is nothing, right? It's just nothing compared to other schools. This is, what comes out is what is this? How does the culture perceive it? And I have to keep coming around to it. I'm going to say it several times, because if that's not clear, then the whole discussion, the debate, doesn't make sense, because we're going to be fighting how different cultures from different countries view their values of what education is, and how it should be subsidized and or paid for by taxes or not. And so this is a deep issue. This is a value system thing. This is a worldview issue, and I talk about this in these videos about working with the French, working with the Germans, working with the Americans. I discuss these things. Because different countries won't see the view from the other country's point of view, right? The other culture's point of view, and it's hard for them to tolerate or accept it. And this comes down to is how can you tolerate that others have different points of view, and can you accept that others have a different point of view that may be different to yours, and can you accept that as okay and correct, or do you have to say this is wrong, right? And the American culture does have this, well, there's only right or wrong. There's no third flavor, right? And I talk about that in my Working with Americans video series. Again, another thing, this whole thing of tolerating and allowing for others to be able to, how that is perceived, and how that is approached, and how that is believed in, convictions and values. And this is not shared among all cultures. And that's why I make the video series, to help us understand each other's cultures, because we have to understand that we have different value systems. So if you start with that, start from there. That's where the discussion should start from, to be able to understand this in deeper ways, right? But again, this is not a simple, I don't think this simple one thing you can discuss in like 2 minutes and at a pitch video, right? And say, this is the way it is. Because if you don't understand how deep this is, ingrained in these different cultures, then you won't be able to discuss, negotiate, dialogue, debate, whatever you want to, and dispute in a way that's constructive for everyone, right? So this is my thoughts on it, but I thought this is something to really consider. So thanks for listening, Jeff.